Hey everyone, it is Amp from the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. You are checking out our Broken Skull Sessions series, and today we are covering the Broken Skull Sessions episode with the Big Red Machine, Kane. And this is a great episode. Kane explores not every moment of his career, but a lot of the pivotal moments of his career from debuting as Isaac Yankem to his entire sort of introduction to his Kane character, fighting the Undertaker WrestleMania, Inferno matches, Corporate Kane, Team Hell No, and much more. So first, I want to thank you for checking us out. We are streaming everywhere podcasts are available, including Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and much more. Just search the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast and make sure you like us on the platforms. We are also available on YouTube. Check us out, the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. Subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to stay notified when new content is created. You get a little notification to your cell phone when you hit the notification bell whenever new content is dropped. So be sure to do that. So let's jump right into this. So we start off, and Stone Cold talks about how Kane is the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, and Austin pretty much plugs his book, Mayor Kane, which Kane recently wrote. Kane talks about growing up, he watched All-Star Wrestling in Tennessee, and he remembers seeing Baron Von Raschke come on the TV, and Raschke had this weird thing, well, his move, the claw, which was sort of to scare wrestlers, and Kane remembers being little and getting scared, and he like turned it off right away. Uh, he played football, and while he was playing, he worked with Boris Malenko, and he got hurt and while playing football, and he eventually decided to go into professional wrestling. He says that you don't really learn about psychology of wrestling until you are in front of a crowd, which is very important to be able to know what the crowd wants and be able to put on a good match. Kane met with Dutch Mantel in Puerto Rico. Dutch Mantel is Uncle Zebekiah and also Zeb Coulter in WWE. So Dutch Mantel had this group in Puerto Rico called La Familia, and at one point it was just Puerto Rico. The fans were very into the show. They didn't really buy the fact that it was scripted. And during the show, a fan tripped Dutch Mantel, and while he was walking, and Dutch cut the front of his eye, and Dutch had to get 14 stitches after that incident. So Puerto Rico was a territory that a lot of fans took very seriously. Kane ended up moving to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where he worked with Jim Cornette, and he remembers the first time he ever had a match with the Undertaker in 1995 in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Undertaker got the win, but the two of them had a great match. He ended up going to Stamford, where he met with Vince, and Vince McMahon ended up asking Kane if he was afraid of dentists, and Kane was like, "You don't really know what to say." And Vince McMahon came up with the character of an evil dentist named Isaac Yankem, sort of I Yankem. Kane was both happy and distraught because during that time gimmicks were sort of everywhere, and he wasn't sure he could pull off a dentist character. And he talks about how he didn't really have a lot of confidence when he's in the ring with wrestlers like The Undertaker and Bret the Hitman Hart. Vince really thought that Isaac Yankem would be a great character, but Kane wasn't really behind it. He also discusses the Kuwait incident between Vader and The Undertaker. Vader and The Undertaker go on this Kuwait talk show, and the interviewer asks, Vader about it being fake, and Vader gets up to the guy, pulls on his jacket, and basically, is this fake to you? And, he ends up getting arrested and having to spend a couple of days in a Kuwaiti jail, and he obviously gets released. And he just thought that was a crazy incident. And then eventually Vince came up with the idea of having fake Diesel, and Kane believes that that character, Kane being able to be fake evil, showed Vince that he could be professional and do what Vince asked of him. Then eventually, Bruce Pritchard or Jim Cornette, doesn't remember which one, called him and told him that he would be his character would now be the Undertaker's brother, and he would be equal to the Undertaker. Uh, and he got pictures of his costume, and there was a cape involved and everything, and Kane felt that it was very superhero-esque, and he didn't really understand the gimmick, and he called Vince, and Vince told him that Kane dresses like a hero because he's a psychotic monster, and because of his issues, he sort of feels like one way to feel better about himself is pretend he is a superhero, and he believes that Kane would dress like that. And then they talk about the way Kane looked, and Jim Ross had the idea of the one eye contact with the creepy eye. He loved his first mask and the costume, and Kane claims that a mask would last 4 to 5 months. And he also talks about how his suit would always get dirty. He would rely on, when it came to his character, because he didn't talk, he relied on body language. So the head tilt he would do, and he actually learned that head tilt from his Saint Bernard dog. So we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Kane's debut at Bad Blood, his WWE title match against Stone Cold Steve Austin, his feud with, well, not feud, but his memorable fireman with Jim Ross, and much, much more. Stay tuned. The Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast family would like you to check out Anchor.
With Anchor, you can record, edit, and publish your own podcast for free.
Distributing your podcasts has never been this easy with Anchor, which allows you to send out your podcast to platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and much, much more.
Get uncensored and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome back. You are checking out the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast, and we are covering the Broken Skull sessions with Kane. And we just learned the different characters that Kane had, and now Kane was actually going to become this real plain Kane character. Kane's real name is Glenn Jacobs, just for those wondering. So Kane talks about how his debut, he was in his car with his friend, and the car caught on fire. And he was so nervous he was going to make his debut at Bad Blood, but eventually his friend called a friend, and that person was able to drive them to the arena. When Undertaker and Kane were supposed to have their big match at WrestleMania 14, Kane discusses how he never got burned by any fire. He never forgets Undertaker's entrance with the druids and the fire and all that cool stuff. Kane felt like that match sort of made him more powerful because he was able to kick out of 2 pile drivers by The Undertaker. And then after The Undertaker won, Kane did leave The Undertaker lying. And that helped make Kane, he believes. And he also talks about his relationship with The Undertaker and how The Undertaker always had his back prior to WWE, and so they always had a good relationship. And then they talk about his rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Austin remembers having the blood being poured on him on a Raw's War episode, and that was Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was one of his favorite moments and angles, was with Kane. And Stone Cold Steve Austin had to fight Kane at King of the Ring in 1998 with a staph infection. And Kane watched the Hell in a Cell match between Undertaker and Mankind before, and they were just like, wow, how are we going to follow that up? And during the main event, Mankind was supposed to come down and be involved, but, obviously Mankind got really messed up during the match. And Vince ends up telling Kane, listen, if Mankind doesn't come out, then you'll have to put the match together. And Kane's like, me, like, why me? Like, I can't do this. Like, fighting Stone Cold. So he ends up defeating Stone Cold at King of the Ring 1998 to become the WWE champion. However, Stone Cold ended up defeating Kane for the title the next night on Raw as War. However, Kane really liked losing the title to Stone Cold. The crowd was electric, and it was the loudest that he remembers, and he really thought that that was another great moment for him too. The fans really wanted to see Stone Cold get the title back, which was great. He loves tag team matches, and he talks about Paul Bearer, and he says that Paul Bearer was really sort of like his manager. He talks about how, Kane tried to keep kayfabe alive, and he would wear the mask and, a ski mask around, and he would drive a car. And he remembers driving a car to the arena, and he has a ski mask on, and Paul Bearer is driving with him. Paul Bearer is screaming out the window, Kane can drive, Kane can drive. So in 2003, he really wants to reinvent his character, and when he took off the mask, he felt naked at first. He thought his character was like Red Dragon and Hannibal Lecter. A lot of fans don't like the fact that he didn't have scars, but Kane's scars were on the inside of his body, not his face. So that made Kane more insane, the fact that Kane would believe he had scars when inside it was the part that was really hurting him. They then laugh about the segment where Jim Ross was set on fire because he couldn't believe that Jim would agree and allow that to happen. We then see a funny skit where Team Hell No was involved in the therapy session, and Kane just goes over his whole career, with Paul Bearer being his dad, the Undertaker burning down the house, all the good, electrocuting someone's testicles, like all these crazy moments like Kane went through. It was a very funny skit. He never really understood burnout, but he did eventually start to feel that way. And he talks about Pete Rose, how Pete Rose was such a great professional, and their 3-year rivalry between WrestleMania 14 and WrestleMania 2000 was a highlight of Kane's, time. And, the interview comes to an end after Kane basically just says that he loves popping in for WWE every now and then. He has fun. He was a former 24/7 champion, but he loves being a mayor. And this was such a great interview because you got to hear a lot from Kane about many other wrestlers and about his time. I enjoy this one a bit more than Goldberg. However, we have our next Broken Skull sessions that will be premiering in March. The big show. Get ready to hear about him, his thoughts on WCW, WWE, how he felt with the locker room, how he had heat, and just some of his great moments. We'll get to that. But thank you for checking out this Broken Skull session with Kane. You can definitely check in the archives, the different sessions. We have Stone Cold sessions with The Undertaker, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, Goldberg, and now Kane. So definitely check out those others. And definitely stay tuned to the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. We have a lot more stuff coming your way. All right, guys, be safe, and I will talk to you soon.